Welcome to the Look Good Move Well podcast.
I don't think we're getting any sound feedback from down there. Yeah. But yeah, we just, we're podcasting, and on the last episode, we heard the key code.
The door beep.
So like, well, somebody's here. We have our, well, I guess he's technically our second member, but we have two members at the gym right now that come in regularly. Yeah. We've got Jim and Willie, Jim and his dog Willie. And then now my dad is coming in. I think he's on a 6-day-a-week plan right now.
That's awesome.
He's just, he went from 0 to 6. No, I tell him to come in and push and pull the sled for 10 laps. And then he goes home. But 2 days a week, maybe one or two, he's supposed to do some squats and some a couple upper body exercises as well. But he's moving better already.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you guys can't hear it, but in the background right now, there's a little shh, and that's the sled on the turf.
It's the gentle sound of a sled.
The gentle sound of the sled on the turf. Yeah. Might hear some heavy breathing too down there.
That's how we roll around here.
That's right. All right. And what else? What else can we banter about?
Well, what Netflix show are you obsessed with right now?
Oh, well, we finished Ozark, like the current episodes, and got a little bit of our life back without having and so like the last 2 nights we just haven't really watched much, except for we're like, oh, what's something else we could watch? And we want to watch The Tinder Swindler, and then we also want to watch this Bad Vegan.
Yeah. Okay. And there's also the one I'm watching now is Inventing Anna, which is
okay.
I'm getting into this whole genre of like the swindling genre. And this is something I've been dying to talk about the Tinder Swindler on this podcast actually, because I have something to say about this genre of show, which is that, okay, here's my thought for the FBB. I swear it relates to FBB.
It doesn't have to.
Okay, I know, but it does. So the whole thing is that when you're watching these shows, the victims of the fraud, whether you're like a Tinder Swindler victim or, the people who are in Anna's world, if you've seen the show, you always think, oh, that's so ridiculous. I would never give this person just tons of money. And It's so stupid how they fall for the ploy or whatever.
Yeah.
But what is really amazing to me is how the person who's doing the lying and the scheming is able to so fully get people's buy-in and really convince people who are otherwise just very smart, logical people to like fork over large amounts of money or do other sorts of things. And I thought to myself, what's so fascinating is that if we allow ourselves to be okay with the fact that we can be persuaded, can we persuade ourselves in a good way? Like, could you just become somebody totally like a million times better or a million times different than who you are now, like going to the opposite side of the spectrum? Because I think the underscore point is that we're more malleable than we think.
Right.
Like we think we're just, gonna achieve X level of success in whatever we try, but like, hey, maybe we could be convinced. Maybe we can defraud ourselves otherwise.
But isn't the commonality here that they're malleable, but only at the hands of somebody else's influence? Like none of this is coming from inside of them. Like I just really feel like I need to give this guy some money. Yeah.
But I think with certain amounts of experiences like that you can have in like meditation or retreats or like, I don't know, doing psychedelics or something, like you can sort of crack open your normal sphere of what you would typically include in your world.
Yeah. And I'm sure that there's a recipe for like, how do you curate the right type of influence, like before you get too deep in it? It's like, okay, I recognize that I've been watching a lot of this person, like, but I haven't gotten to that stage where I'm just buying anything that they have to sell or I'm doing anything. I'm still in that early phase of like, oh, I'm curious. Like, what are the questions we should ask ourselves about, like, okay, am I heading down a path? Like, is this the person that I want to, are there any signs, like, I'm sure there's some signs of like swindling going on early on that maybe we're overlooked, or perhaps there's like, hey, what are the signs that I'm actually, this person's really honest and aligned, and I don't know.
And, I'm very conscious of the fact that we are ourselves influencing people in the health and fitness world.
Right.
And hopefully in a good way. But, we're not saying that you need to buy Marcus's shorts, although those are great shorts, that you've got on. So
I like them.
Maybe you should buy them, but...
Yeah. Use code Marcus Philly. No, I'm just kidding. Well, yeah. And yeah, it's like Megan and I have these conversations. It's like, something on social media, somebody's getting swindled, somebody's, doing something very, like, there's some movement that's like damaging like a sector of the population. And it's like, we're like, oh, this thing is so horrible. And I'm part of the game.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a conflict. Like, do I just shut it off, or do I just do everything in my power to do it as honestly and as good as possible, for others? And, I think at the heart of it comes back to like, how did we get started in our business and our brand? And then even before that, how did I really like approach social media that I think led to some success, which was, it's interesting. If I go back far enough, like, there wasn't a direct or even anything that I was aware of that was there was something to gain from social media.
Right.
Other than, I think it was just like feeling like I wasn't alone and there were people that were interested and cared about what I was doing.
Yeah.
That was all I was really doing, was like, I just knew I want to share as much of what's happening as I can. And maybe it, because my life pursuits at the time social media became a thing for me were very isolating. Like, I was on this very personal mission to do this thing. It was fitness mainly. Like, that was my fitness journey, was like, I spent a lot of time alone doing it. Like, I wasn't doing group class anymore. I was now like training myself for betterment. I'm like, I want to share what's going on.
Yeah.
And if there's one reader that gives me a thumbs up, like, that feels really good. Or even just putting it out there in the world feels like, okay, maybe I'm sharing a lesson here. And there's the same reason I wrote a travel blog when I was in my early 20s and I was, out and about in various parts of the world just by myself. And I was just like, I just want to write about this experience, and then, maybe somebody will read it. And I'm sure that's why a lot of bloggers got into it, because there wasn't a ton of money to be made in blogging when it first started.
Yeah.
And then it was like, well, there's no money to be made in social media. We're just like sharing things and getting likes. And there's sort of this like, and that was kind of the mission, was like, well, I'm going to share this because it helps me to process my own growth as a human. And, it actually seems to be helping somebody else, and they're getting some ideas. And then eventually the first transaction happened, where it's like, hey, will you coach me? I was like, oh, yeah, how do you even know about me? They're like, oh, because I follow your blog or I follow your social media, and then fast forward to present day, there's a lot of that exchange going on. But the moment that we switch, if I ever switch, or there is this, this like, I get swindled into thinking that this is the way, it's like, okay, I got to provide, I'm going to put this up because I'm going to get something back.
Right.
Like that breaks the system. Mm-hmm. And that is where a lot of this, the evil that is out there, I think that that's the source of it, is I'm putting this out because I want to get this back, versus I'm putting this out there for my own, like, I want to share, I want to contribute, I want to give something to people, and then they can come forth and want to hear it, they can come forth and decide they want to give back.
Yep.
But there's no expectation. This is just it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's such a hard line to draw, because like, yeah, at the end of the day, like I want to sit around all day and make really valuable content for people. You know, if it doesn't pay the bills, eventually I'm going to have to go and get a job where I can pay bills, you know, exchange my time for money. And then if I have a little extra time, I'll go back to making content. So yeah, it helps if the content itself can drive revenue, because then I get to do more of it, you know? And that's kind of what, anyway.
Yes.
But it does point to this topic that we will cover today at some point.
No, I was going to have you introduce the topic because there is such a clear tie-in here.
Yeah, and this was, you know, just a decision yesterday to just share a story of mine that I've alluded to in the past, but I've never really shared a lot of details about it. But here's a story of mine that I put on Instagram, and you know, the response was overwhelming. Overwhelming always, you know, generally means a lot of people wrote back direct messages that were more than a thumbs up. Mm-hmm. They were like sentences, if not paragraphs, saying, I really appreciate that this is something that you're sharing. I have this going on too. Hey, I'm going to go get my blank checked right now. Hey, I you know, it's great to know that this is like not a death sentence, and that people like yourself and so are showing that you can do things at a high level without like having to, you know, mitigate things with pharmaceuticals and blah, blah, blah. So I'll get into the details of it, but it was just to say, like, I just took a chance. Honestly, it happened because I just decided to go check comments on a particular post, and I hadn't seen like kind of one of these, like, you know, subtle steroid accusations in a while. And I was like, oh, let's just talk about this, you know, because this is a real thing that's been, you know, in my mind and weighing on me, and it's been a relevant topic in a lot of different things that we've discussed lately. So I was like, oh, I'm going to just share a little bit more about what's going on here. And you know, don't have to believe it, but this is my story. This is my history. If this helps you, or if this resonates with you, I'd love to hear back. And boom, you know, lots of people wrote back.
Yeah. Yeah. I do definitely want to hear the details for everyone, but I also want to say before we get into that it's very important, I think, your example and what that means to people, because you have achieved so much physically, and we've talked about it on the podcast and in YouTube episodes and multiple pieces of content where, okay, yeah, haha, like people always accuse people who are jacked of like doing steroids. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Been there, done that. But I think one thing that's unique about your story in particular is how detail oriented you've been on nutrition and lifestyle and health and wellness protocols, like for since I've known you and beyond, like just that's how you live. And so I think there's a lot of gray area where people wonder, oh, you know, if I is it this part of my life or that part of my life? And they're not as scientifically controlled around these things as perhaps you are. And so I think someone who's in your spot, who has experienced this with great nutrition, with great training, with all the things you're kind of supposed to do, I think is just kind of a very enlightening case and really can be an example for people.
Yeah. And well, thanks for saying that. And I, you know, along the way in the story, there's a lot of subtle lessons and things, you know, that I think might be seemingly unrelated, but they impact people all the time. Yeah. I'll get into it, but like even in my early 20s, you know, I had a blood test done, and for one reason, it turned up a result that nobody was like expecting or even paying attention to really, but it was a red flag. And then it led me down this very, you know, convoluted follow-up testing protocol with specialists, which for a young kid who thought he was pretty healthy, like raised a tremendous amount of anxiety and ultimately led to nothing. So it was like, you know, a lesson there. It was like, don't go looking for things if you don't need to, because you might turn up something that could open up a whole different thing that all it does in the end is just stress you out.
Yeah.
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 So anyhow, the post was, I don't even like the Instagram post was like, me doing back day or I don't know, something out in the yard, looking kind of tan, looking kind of jacked. And the comment was, funny how you're like, you seem to be jacked year round, looking shredded and something, blah, 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 needle emoji, needle emoji, needle emoji.
Right.
And, and then I was like, well, it's actually not funny. Here's how it's not funny. Here's how the story of, my own story of like hormones goes. And it's not like a traumatic story by any means. Like, let's start with like, I've accomplished a lot physically in my life. I have competed in sports. I've never at any point in my competitive career felt like I was like, I never had a mindset of like, I'm limited. I can't do something.
Right.
I'm incapable. It was always like, fuck, how am I going to get better? I got to keep working harder. I got to do, I always maintain a position where I will see somebody in the world and I'll be like, damn, they're crushing it. Like, and it does not occur to me to think, oh, they're on steroids. No, I'm like, what are they doing that I'm not? And I'll be like, they're working out twice a day. They're eating this way. They're doing this. They have like, they focus on that. Like, oh, okay. Like, and the steroid thing doesn't show up for me. So I've been guilty of this. Like I've seen athletes that I come to find out later are on performance enhancing drugs. And for the period of time that I was really like captivated by them, it didn't occur to me. And I just was like, I'm going to do that to get better. And I got better.
Yeah.
And then later I found out, oh, so-and-so was on drugs. Oh, no. Well, that explains a lot, but it doesn't matter. Cause like I saw that and I was like, yep. Because the drugs don't do the work for you.
Right.
The drugs enhance the work. That's why they're called enhancements. It's like, so what was the work that this person was doing that was effective that just got enhanced? Oh, they were actually eating a lot more. Oh God, I need to eat more if I want to grow. Mm-hmm. Whoa, they were doing some like actually good mobility and flexibility work, like on top of their training. Oh, this person was like they were. I'm thinking of a particular athlete back in the CrossFit days who was like throwing around some ridiculous Olympic weightlifting numbers. One of the first guys to snatch 300 in the CrossFit world. Like, and I was like, holy smokes! Like he's way better than me at Olympic lifting. How? And I just watched his technique. I mean, he had beautiful technique, and I just used that to get better.
Yep.
Yeah, he found out he was doing steroids. Oh, maybe that's why. But I still learned a lot from that. So anyhow, that's the preface to the story where it's like, I've learned a lot through watching this, and I don't feel like I was ever, limited myself. But it starts in my early 20s when I was in college and it was my senior year, and I had just gone through my first, I've talked about this a lot, like the first wave of season of training in my life where it was like post soccer career, I got into weight training to try and get ripped, and I got ripped. I was like calorically deprived or in a deficit for a long time. I was training with good principles, things were great. And then they kind of started to like turn into overtraining symptoms, injured myself, and I just went into this big depression. Now, at the time, was it circumstantial because I was injured, or was there actually some neurochemistry things going wrong because I had been in such a deficit, or maybe my hormones had tanked because I was training too hard and not eating enough. I was eating the wrong stuff. I don't know, but I was depressed, and the psychologist that I was working with was like, maybe we should get you on antidepressants. I'm like, okay, that's going to make me feel better. Like, I'm pretty desperate. I'll do whatever. Sure. Go get a blood test. Let's make sure everything's checked out. No big, okay, whatever. Probably my first blood draw ever. Got it. Went to the, school campus thing, take blood, blah, 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 comes back. Everything looks fine. We can get you on antidepressants, but your testosterone's really low. Like out of reference range, red dot next to it, not in the green zone. And reference range on testosterone, I don't know what it was 15 years ago. I'm not specific on what it is today for US, guidelines, but let's just say it's 275 to 800. All right. So that's a big range. Like if you're at 800 or you're at 300, you're considered in the zone. Like you're good. That's 2.5 times, the amount of testosterone moving around your body if you're on one end of the spectrum or the other. So it's a massive range. And there are a lot of health practitioners that would say, hey, if you're even in like the under 400, like you might be in the good range according to labs, but you're not in a good range. That's not good. Well, I'm below the whole range. And so they're like, hey, you should check that out. We need to get you to go see a hematologist oncologist. And I'm like, what do they do? I'm like applying to medical school. Like I'm in the medical, sphere. I'm like, why am I going to see an oncologist right now? They're like, we're ruling out that you have a tumor or some type of cancer that's causing this. Like, you might have a pituitary tumor, a brain tumor that is not allowing you to like send the signals to your testes to make testosterone. I was like, holy shit, like that seems stressful. Like that's not good. And
right.
I'm already depressed. I'm like, well, fuck, I'm totally messed up, And so, 21-year-old kid who's just like, I just don't see what there is that's really good in life right now,
Yeah.
Anyway, follow-up tests, go to the big hospital across the bay. My parents are my dad's a physician. He's making phone calls to make sure I'm seeing the best specialist, like getting the connections. And, months go by after a bunch of tests and follow-ups, and it's like, yeah, you're good. That might just be your normal.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. I think somebody planted that seed in my head at that time, was like, that might just be your normal. And I never thought about it again. And I was just like, all right, we're going forward. Like, got out of college, my back healed, traveled around the world a bit, got with some new people, got in a new environment, felt better, started medical school again, got depressed.
Again.
Went on antidepressants again, did not need to take a blood test this time, so didn't
know what was going on.
Dropped out of medical school, pursued a new life, got off my antidepressants, fitness instructor, doing CrossFit, feeling happy, feeling purpose. Life's good.
Yeah.
Right? So 21 was when I found out low T. Now I'm 30, and now I'm like 28. 7 years later. 7 years later, I'm a pretty good CrossFit athlete now. And I have coaches who are coaching not just CrossFit athletes, but like they're doing holistic lifestyle fitness coaching.
Right.
They work with naturopaths to like get people's like whole life, looking right. Like, let's check your blood, let's check your hormones. Like, they like to look at this whole hormonal axis in your body of your adrenals, your testes, and then your thyroid. And they want to make sure everything's working right. Like, those are key contributors to like optimal health. So anyway, my fitness coach was like, hey, we should get a blood panel, and just see what's going on. I'm like, sure. Yeah. Like, not thinking anything about this testosterone thing. Like,
yep.
I'm the 25th fittest person in the world in CrossFit. I've got a lot of muscle. I can snatch 285. I can back squat 450. Like, I don't have any issues with testosterone. Like, I have a girlfriend. I have good libido. Like, we have sex regularly. Like, it's not on my mind. Get the blood test. Yeah, your testosterone's really low. What? Like, how? That's still a thing? And a low at this point was like in the, again, like the 250 range, like just below the reference range. And so then I'm like, oh, well, something that did not occur to me as a problem. I had no symptoms of a problem. I got the blood test. Now it's a problem. Now I'm talking to this naturopath about like, well, why could this be? Like, I'm all about optimizing myself. I want to be the best that I can be. I'm checking my sleep. I got the HRV, thing on my wrist. This is actually before Whoop. This is when you had to put a heart rate strap on your chest, laying in bed every morning, stick a thing into your phone, a little adapter, take the reading, And then like, don't move, don't get up. Like, and I'm like anxious to like see a result that's not good because I don't want to not train that day. Like it was fucked up. But anyway, I'm like doing everything. I'm eating as good as I can. I'm taking the supplements. I'm doing what I know at the time. This thing pops up. So of course I want to investigate it, talk to this naturopath, and they're like, yeah, man, you're just like, you know, it's clear that people in the sport of CrossFit pushing this type of intensity and this type of lactic acid training on a daily basis can have cortisol, elevated cortisol levels, or just cortisol issues, which is an adrenal hormone. And if you're like constantly producing cortisol and lactic acid all the time, that can become this like focal point of the body's hormonal system, and it can steal the raw ingredients away from the testosterone production, and therefore you're low on testosterone. So that was the explanation. I was like, oh, okay, so I'm just training so hard that like my testosterone's low. I was like, that's it? Like, it's like, yeah. It's like, okay, well, can I do anything about it? It's like, well, you could supplement this, you could take that. And I'm like, are any of these things like legal to take? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, then what the hell are we talking about? Like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So forget it.
Yeah.
Guess what? The next 3 years, I got fitter, stronger, and became the 12th fittest person in the world.
Yeah.
And I got a girl pregnant. I got my wife pregnant.
Got a girl pregnant.
I knocked her up. So I'm like, I'm still fine, you know, like, and then, and then fast forward to 2020, I think it was 2019. I've got 2 kids now. We've got a thriving but a very involved business, so it's like a lot of energy going there. You know, I'm just like an adult now, and there's just different stresses, and I've imposed a lot more stress and anxiety on myself. And 2020, 2019, like I'm not feeling my best. I've discussed it here. I had like this whole bout of like digestive issues going on,
right,
which I wanted to investigate. So like now 2019, first time in my life, at least in like a good decade, where I'm like, I'm feeling like the first, like, I don't feel right.
Yeah.
And so I start to like do some investigating, like, let me get another blood panel, you know, and this is the blood panel to like see what's going on with my like diarrhea that I was having for months on end.
Right.
Testosterone thing again. Right. And it's like, well, maybe your gut is so damaged that it's like creating, like, now there's a new reason why I have low testosterone. So I investigate that some. I'm like, maybe I need to get with another naturopath. And then like in 2020 or 2021, like I'm feeling kind of low energy. Like I've now got like these new symptoms that I'm like, I'm low energy. Like maybe, you know, I don't know. I'm like trying to make sense of why I don't feel like a king that is just crushing life and everything, you know? And the most logical answer is, yeah, you've got a couple little kids back to back. You've been pretty, you know, there's like that 9-month period where you're kind of sleep deprived. And then there was another like 6 or 9 month period where you're pretty sleep deprived. And, you know, now you're just you're a little bit more stressed, and a lot more stressed than I was when I was 26 and living with Megan and coaching CrossFit classes and competing. Like now I'm 34 and I got, you know, a mortgage. I got employees. I got to figure out how we're going to, you know, like all these things, kids like that. I don't know how to be a parent. Like I'm figuring this out. So that's the logical reason why I'm not feeling my best. But I'm like, well, no, what's going on with my, you know, I got to figure out what's going on with my, let's investigate. And like, a couple more blood panels. Oh, your testosterone's low. Oh, it's low. Okay, let me try this thing. Let me try this thing to try and make it better. And this thing is, let me try intermittent fasting. Maybe that'll help. Let me try switching to a higher like fat diet. You know, cholesterol. Those are the building blocks of androgens, of testosterone. Let me get more fat in my diet because I was eating high carb, lower or moderate fat for a while for competing. Let me change my diet. Let me get more sun. Was
the vertical diet in here somewhere, or was that
vertical diet was part of healing my gut?
That was the gut thing. Yeah.
But that's also very much the
it's
same.
Good for testosterone.
So I'm like,
He's chugging chicken broth nonstop.
Yeah, which I'm going to get back to.
I mean, that's good.
I'm kind of doing the beef
good,
broth. It's good stuff. Yeah. Anyway, the point is like I've, over 16 years, maybe a total of like 7 blood tests. I think at best it was like I cracked the 270 mark and it was like, oh, I was in the reference range, but it's just been low.
Yeah.
And, most recently, a big part of the reason why I'm curious about ancestral diets, animal-based diets, is because it was kind of this first exposure to something that was so new and so like, have I been missing some key raw ingredients in my diet? And have I been exposing my gut, which is, I've had a history of it being sensitive to sort of toxic plant matter that has been affecting my overall inflammatory system, stress system. That's why I kind of have been exploring it too. Is like, I'm always in search of like, is there a way to maybe optimize what's going on for me? But if I take a step back, it's like, well, there's been 5 different reasons over the past decade and a half why my testosterone's been low, and none of them necessarily match. It's like, well, maybe it's because of this, maybe it's because of that, and at times it's gotten me really stressed out. It's got me really like, what the heck is wrong with me? Like, maybe I really need to go on testosterone replacement therapy because I'm really like, I'm not feeling my best. Like over this past winter, I was like dealing with some major anxiety and major like, I wouldn't go as far as say it's depression, but it was bordering on depression. I was like, gosh, like I want a solution. Like I feel like I'm doing the right things, but I want to reach for something. And here I've got blood test after blood test that say this, and probably a list of 100 doctors that would line up to just be like, yeah, I'll prescribe you this thing, this testosterone replacement. And anyway, it's like, I don't know what the overarching lesson is in all of this. There's little small lessons along the way. But today in the last couple months, or the last month, I've had a big lift in my mood and my energy, and it's kind of coincided with the sun being out and me getting more sun exposure every day. I'm tan as F. Like, this is the most tan I've ever been in March.
Yeah.
In
well,
my
you
life.
work in the sun, just rotating your angle constantly.
I do. I get I'm like, today things got messed up, but I'm committed to 2 hours of sun exposure each day. And, it's been helping me. So like today I'm not thinking about like, do I need to get on TRT? But like 4 months ago, I was like, man, maybe, and I had a conversation with a doctor on the phone about animal-based diets. And I explained to him a little bit about my history, and he was like, hey, you might have a hypogonadism that is like, goes back to when you were a kid, you had like a trauma, and your testes might just not be able to produce because if you look at my blood panel, like there are brain hormones that are signaling them to make more. They're there, but they're not responding. So, and so this post that I put, I got a lot of interesting comments back, but somebody was like, oh, why don't you show your full panels? I was like, okay, like, I hope if that helps, sure. Yeah. And then someone's like, well, did you ever have a trauma? And I'm like doing voice message back to them. And I'm like, I can't think of anything. I mean, I did play some contact sports that, I played soccer. Actually, you know what I remember? I do remember taking a baseball off my, nuts when I was like 12 years old, really bad. It was like a bad one. Like my baseball coach at the time, it was raining. So he's like, we're going to go over onto the asphalt and we're going to use these rubber baseballs and I'm going to hit you, like ground balls. We're going to just do like infield practice. I was like, cool. Well, a rubber ball doesn't bounce the same as a leather ball on grass. A rubber ball on a concrete that's wet is unpredictable. So I was a decent field player, but I missed the ball completely and it crushed me in the nuts when I was young. So I'm like, oh, and this happened today on DM. I'm like, wait, was that one
was that the one?
Was that the trauma that messed up my testosterone for the rest of my life? I don't know. But anyway, so some things have been floating in, and then this person's like, well, you should try this herb, and maybe you should try that. And it's like, well, I don't know. Again, like, I'm not symptomatic right now in a way that's making me feel, but then it's like, oh, well, so my commitment for a long time has just been like, well, and I said at the beginning, like, I don't feel like I'm at a deficit. I feel like it pushes me to just continue to try and optimize my lifestyle, my nutrition, my movement, my, all the things that are kind of free and I have access to, and that I don't need a doctor to prescribe me. I still work on my mental health with professionals too. So that's not free, but I invest in that. And, only when I'm symptomatic and I feel really down and low, which happens at various intervals in my adult life, whether it's the wintertime blues or, a big stressful event going on, I'm really anxious, and, if things get out of whack, then it's funny. It's like I have this thing in my brain that I have a deficit in me.
Yeah.
Because somebody tested it and they said it. And so I go to like, maybe that's the thing, maybe that's what needs to be fixed. Like, maybe I'm depressed because I don't have enough testosterone in my blood.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a dangerous thing for people, because I think we're all going to go through ups and downs in life. And if you believe you have a deficit because somebody said you have a deficit, then you're going to likely hang your hat on that. And that's why I think it's very, in fitness, like why I've always been cautious to downplay like the whole assessment process of athletes. You come in, it's like, I used to flex my knowledge and be like, oh yeah, you have bad pronation of your right foot, and it's this, and it's like, I just like was like, there's a weakness. If I tell you it's a weakness, you're going to think I'm so smart. And then I'm like, wait a minute. I'm handicapping you from believing it, that you have the ability to overcome. If I talk about it that way, if I say, oh, you got a wonky ass hip, Satya. And now it's like every time, like,
I literally got so depressed after you pointed out my snatch imbalance today.
Well, and I hope it wasn't because I pointed it out, or I accept that I may have triggered that. But you're like, oh, I got a snatch imbalance. And what was the first thing you said? It's like, oh, it must be my wonky hip thing.
Yeah.
I asked the arm length thing, which was, I don't know, that in
You're
retrospect,
flexing your knowledge.
I was not trying to, but you've anyway. So it's those assessments of people, or those tests, that's powerful stuff that can really, it can hang with somebody a long time. And I remember Matt Fraser doing some podcasts and talking about, like, he didn't want to have, don't give me the sleep device thing. Don't tell me I'm waking up and I'm not ready to go train. Like, fuck that. I'm going to train. Like, I don't want to think I'm not ready. And I think he had a similar, he talked about getting a blood test where his testosterone was low, and it just messed with him. Yeah. And then he got like a follow-up test like 2 months later, and it was like normal. And he was like, oh, maybe it's just a faulty test, or, it was like, right. He talked about going to like the Nike Performance Center, and like they had all these like top athletes, and they put them all through the tests, and his scores were like the worst of all of the guys that were there and the girls. But he's still the champion. Yeah. And so the test results were like, he's like in his head, like, what's wrong with me? Like, it's like, you're not symptomatic. Be careful what you go looking for. Yeah. And if you are symptomatic and you go and find something, it's like, it's also, obviously it's like, if you're symptomatic, you have something, you can fix it. That's beautiful. Like, that's a great, loop, but it's also, it can be tricky because you have a problem, you go to solve it, you find something. It's like, I have knee pain. Let me go get an MRI on my knee. Guarantee you they're going to find something wrong.
That's their job, to find something wrong.
And then when they find it, they're going to tell you that they can fix it. And then they're going to fix it. And the percentage of people that have success after that is not 100%. What does that mean? That wasn't the problem for a lot of people. It was just something that they found because you pointed them to the thing that was wrong, right? Yeah. That's such a tricky, and that's one of my, it's not like my gripe with the medical system. It's just sort of like my, like, big cautionary, like, stance on it. It's like, be careful what you go looking for if there's a problem, and certainly be careful of what you're going to look for when there's no problem.
Yeah.
It's like this. It's like, go get your 23andMe. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
The genetic thing that's going to tell you all. It's like, I feel great. Oh shit! I've got a propensity to this. I got to change my whole lifestyle. I got to stop eating this thing and that thing, and I got to. It's like, whoa, that's a little bit aggressive, you know. Somebody would argue, and somebody's going to say like, no, that's actually how things are going to go, and like, you just caught something that might have been a problem in 15 years, and it's just it's not so clear cut.
Yeah, and as we get older, we are all going to encounter issues. Everybody's got a weird thing with their body. If you don't already, you're going to have one. You're going to have something.
Right.
And I mean, I have a cataract and I'm super, super young to have one. And at first it was like, oh my God, like, do I have some eye disease? Like, you know, they checked me out. I'm fine. And they're like, look, this is like, you know, it's growing and we could take it out anytime and your insurance will cover it, but there are risks. And so what you have to weigh is like, what's your quality of life, and how much is this thing that you have impacting you and really like keeping you back from the quality of life that you want to live? Yeah. At a certain point, I think you're going to know like, okay, it's tilted. It's like time to really like do something about this.
Yeah. I think that if you can trust that will happen at some point, and you'll know, and you'll have a very strong intuitive sense like when to take things. One thing I'll just add, like I'll finish with is, you know, I think this is what's made me capable of doing as much as I've done. But it's also been an obstacle that I've faced. And that is like, I believe deep inside of me that I am capable of so much more that I'm doing. Like that, you know, it's striving for perfection, but it's more than just perfection. It's like I can get so much out of me, you know, because I've had so many experiences in my life where things were good and I leveled up considerably because I was open. I was willing to try something new and commit to it, and I experienced like the huge result. And so I keep that, like that's part of me. And so anytime I feel like this little dip or something that like, if my baseline is here and I drop a little bit, I'm like, you know, what is like, something's wrong. Like I gotta, you know, there's so much I gotta do, you know, like I have such a high expectation of what I'm capable of and what I should bring on a daily basis. And I think one of the things I said to Megan recently was like, I'm doing good. Like I'm over here like constantly trying to solve for a problem, but if I just slow the fuck down, like I'm doing good. I'm actually doing really good. Like maybe there's nothing wrong with me right now. Maybe maybe this is just me right now, you know, and let me wait it out versus waking up each day and being like, okay, how am I going to make this better? How am I going to make this better? How am I going to make this better? And that little shift is like, you know, oftentimes the only ingredient that you need is time.
Yeah.
And like, keep doing what you're doing, but wait a month.
Yeah.
And everything's fucking great. You know,
true.
Keep doing what you're doing. And next week, this week it feels like shit, but you just do it. Keep doing it, right? Stay the course. And if I could go back just 2 months ago and talk to myself and say that like I probably wouldn't even listen. I'd be like, you're full of shit. Like, but you must know because you're from the future and you just came back and told me, like, you know. So it's, anyway, there's a lot obviously wrapped up in this whole story. We're already at 45 minutes.
We're at the point where Nate has stopped flashing the time.
He showed me 40, but I just assumed that was about 5 minutes ago. So, but yeah, anyhow, thanks for giving this topic space. I hope it helped somebody out there. Love to get feedback on any of it. And, yeah. And you know, if someone out there has some awesome idea about how to raise testosterone
Yeah.
for a guy like me, then I'm open to hearing it, but
Yeah.
not if it involves, a certain type of pharmaceutical intervention that, is not guided by a physician, and I haven't decided that that's the route I want to go.
Yeah. And in the meantime, you're just the influencer who is a case for being okay.
Being okay.
Yeah.
Being okay.
More than okay.
That's right. We're more than okay. All right. And we're out.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Bye.